Okay, well, I'm going to do a little more disassembly on the Epiphone Strat style guitar. I believe these were just called S and a number designation. I don't know which one this is. It doesn't have any markings on it of any kind, except for just a serial number sticker. But I just thought I'd show off some of the unique features of this Strat style guitar. It's not completely a Strat. It's got that Explorer style, almost hockey stick headstock, and it's got a nut that's very similar to a Gibson nut, where it's got sort of a rounded edge up to a point, and it just sits up against the back of the fretboard instead of riding in a slot like a Fender. So that's kind of unique. It's a 22 fret guitar, and I'm gonna guess it's not a 25.5-inch scale. No, it is. So that's an oddball. It's a 22 fret guitar without an overhang on the neck. So this neck is probably a little bit weird compared to a standard Strat neck. It's definitely got some odd proportions to it, but it's still kind of cool. It doesn't weigh a whole lot. I mean, I can tell it's probably plywood from the weight, but it doesn't weigh a ton. Import guitars a lot of times have weird pole spacing on the pickups. Like they'll have a 48 and a 50 and a 52 millimeter or something like that. These are all 52s, so I guess maybe it's before they started going to that convention. I don't know. But you can see, even just looking at it, that the pole pieces on the outside of this neck pickup are well outside the path of the string. It's just the way they are. That doesn't tend to affect the sound all that much. The distances are so close that they can still pick up the string even if it's not completely over the pole, but it's not ideal, but it works. But yeah, I guess time to tear into this a little bit more. Let's start with how about taking the tremolo out? Taking a tremolo out or installing a tremolo, I usually like to use a really long screwdriver just because it helps me get into that cavity a little straighter. The screws on this one are definitely bent. I'll have to address that. And I shouldn't have to, but somebody must have been in here bending away. This tremolo is in a weird position. It's super high and it's resting against the back of the body and always has been. Oh boy. Yeah, the more that I get into this, the more I can tell these screws are bent. So these tremolo springs that came out are really rusty, and I'm a little bit nervous about the fact that they look kind of short, but I did compare them to a Floyd Rose style spring, and they're only off by about 2 coils, so I could probably make that up with spring tightness, and they do fit. The Floyd springs do fit in the tremolo, so okay, I may not be as bad off as I thought I was. This tremolo is going to come out real easy because it's on 2 floating pins posts. That's a weird screw. Grody. Alright, yeah. Not going to be changing that tremolo because I don't know what size bushings those are, but man, that is small. Okay, what next? think I'll take the neck off. I don't know what it is about every guitar I'm taking apart lately, but none of these neck screws pass freely through the body. They all have some bite, which is just a terrible idea if you're trying to suck the neck up to the body. The idea would be for the body to get sandwiched between the plate and the neck, and you want the 2 points that pull against each other to be those 2 points. You don't want any bite in the screw and in the body itself. That doesn't make sense. The original Fender guitars, you would drill a 3/16 hole in the body and a 1/8 hole in the neck, so the screw would bite into the neck, but it would not bite into the body. And the other benefit there is it gives you a little bit of room to play around if you need to move the neck just slightly in the pocket. You usually have just a little bit of play. Okay. He's not playing nice. Interesting. I'll have to compare that to another neck soon. Maybe when that one dries I'll compare the length, but I bet you this neck is longer than a standard Fender neck. Gonna take the tuners off next, not because you know, I just like disassembling guitars and stuff, but I want to go ahead and polish this headstock back to shiny. It's like got this crusty layer of some kind of scuzz on here. It kind of smells like cat piss. So anyway, off with these things. You know, I was thinking about explaining why someone might like to buy a guitar of this vintage instead of just buying a brand new Fender Squire, you know, Affinity or something like out of the box, or you know, something that's close to new, because you can get them for like 50 to 100 bucks all day long on Marketplace. But you know, these older Korean instruments are starting to get collectible because they're sort of nostalgic to guys that are my age and a little bit younger, and they're not bad instruments. I mean, China is producing pretty good stuff right now, but when China first started producing guitars, I think most people felt that the Japanese certainly, and probably the Korean guitars, were of better quality initially. I think everything really depends on the factory where it's built, honestly, but you know, everybody's got their opinions. I need to get a wrench for that. That's odd. I don't know if these are the original tuners or not, but one thing I'll tell you is that the tuner holes are way too big. Look at all that slop. Oh well. So much for quality, huh? I wonder if somebody had bigger or different tuners on this at one point, because the holes look kind of freshly drilled, and they don't have a lot of polishing compound in them, which I would expect to see. Well, take that back. That one has polishing compound in it. Alright, we're back to blaming Samick for this one. Taking these apart like this, it does give you the opportunity to inspect every single piece and, you know, lube it all up and clean it, polish it. But I will say that no luthier who is getting paid by the job would ever do this in his right mind, because it's way too much work. But it's pretty good for YouTube videos, right? If you can stand to watch me do it. Alright. Now the neck is completely stripped down. This neck's in pretty good shape. It's got a couple of dings I could fill with super glue like I've done in some other videos. But the frets look good. Really good. And I'll polish this thing up, and I may just see if I can wet sand that little ding off, or that white scuff. Maybe touch that point right there up a little bit. But yeah, pretty nice neck. Okay, so I've bagged up all my tuners and all my other parts. Got them all set to the side. I did want to try to get this pick guard off, but that requires a little bit of desoldering. On a Strat style guitar, you only have to usually desolder the bridge, ground wire, and the input jack to get these parts apart. Alright, well, that's all there is to that. It's just your input jack on a Strat always connects to your volume pot in two places. It's going to connect to the middle lug for the white wire, or the central connection point, and then the outer ring of the jack connects to the shielded one of the shielded areas of the guitar, like the back of a pot. So that's the end of this. That will allow me to get my jack out and my tremolo claw out. I've got a couple of strap buttons to take off. That's the body stripped down, so it's more or less ready for paint. I just gotta sand the existing finish down to accept the new paint, and I've got to do some masking. Man, I may just want to do the whole thing. I'll see if I can get some of these scuffs out. I'll have to make that call in a little bit, but I'm going to get this cleaned up and decide on my next steps. Just thought I'd take a quick video and show. I've got basically the body outside where I can deal with the dust, and I've got just a little palm sander with 120 on it, and I'm just scuffing the top up. What I plan on doing with this is basically I'm probably just going to paint the top. If I just focus on the top, then I won't have near as much to deal with, but it'll make the guitar a lot more presentable from the front anyway, and that's the part we really care about. So I'm gonna keep sanding on this, and then we'll probably talk about some masking, and I'll show some of the spraying afterward. And once I'm done sanding, I use my air compressor and I just give it a kind of a quick rinse with air and kind of get a lot of the dust out. And then I'm going to go back over this with a rag and some denatured alcohol. My preparation tool of choice is denatured alcohol. You can do whatever you like, but just hit this with a rag, and it helps to dissolve any of the stuff that's on the surface. Now you can use lacquer thinner. There's probably other products that you could use, but the reason I like denatured is it dries really quickly, and it dissolves quite a few things, but it's not super powerful. It's all cleaned up and it's almost ready for paint. I've got to do the masking. You might have questions about why I used 120. Well, I just want to knock the surface off of the old paint. Asian guitars tend to have a poly paint or a T-stage, like polyurethane paint. It's super durable and it will survive under a lacquer top coat. It'll just need a scuff before I shoot it with some lacquer. And yes, lacquer will go on top of poly, especially if it's old poly. And that's the key here. So this is 30-plus-year-old poly, and it'll work fine. One more thing before we take this guitar off to masking, and that's that, I use denatured on this body because, like I said, it's a pretty good prep overall, and this finish is super durable. But if you use denatured over lacquer, or especially if you use lacquer thinner over lacquer, you're going to take off paint that you might not have intended to take off. So read up on your solvents and just be careful what you use. But if all else fails, Windex is actually pretty good, and it won't hurt very many finishes. Everybody has their own paint prep tricks. You can use a tack cloth, you can use all kinds of stuff, and just up to you. So what do you mask? I chose to mask the bushings. I masked up the neck pocket, even though a lot of guitars you'll see don't have that masked very well. And then I masked all the way up to basically the break in the body line, all the way around. So I'm gonna end up with a guitar that's in nice shape up to the radius, and I'll have to sand over the edge just a little bit when I'm doing my final sanding. All right, so cheap guitar gets cheap paint. This stuff, I've used it quite a bit on cheap guitars. It's really good for a basic lacquer coat. There's another, I think it's a Krylon lacquer that works really well too. You go to Lowe's or Home Depot, you get one or the other. So anyway, the basics of this is you hold it about 12 inches from the surface, something like that. Shoot the guitar, spray it, overlap each stroke, and then kind of go lightly at first, really kind of a dust coat in the beginning, and then these coats, they dry pretty quickly, so they dry in about 15 minutes or half an hour, something like that, and they can be recoated at any time. But my process is basically just shoot it, let it dry, look for any imperfections,
sand those out lightly with some kind of really light, maybe a Scotch-Brite or something like that, and then shoot it again until I'm happy with the thickness of the finish. And you know, it just depends on the guitar. I've done some guitars that I'm happy with 3 coats. I've done some guitars that I'm not happy until I get to 6 or 8. So it just depends on how much you have to sand in between.
So at the current time, what I have done is I've shot everything with a bunch of coats of black, a bunch of coats of clear, I think probably 4 or 5 each. Then I've gone in and done my sanding. Now this sanding I did with 1200 grit with a block and using wet sandpaper. I mentioned I had some reaction or something going on here. I was able to sand that out, so I'm not too worried about it. And the transitions between the old and the new finish are somewhat visible right now. I'll see how that turns out, because right now I can see an actual difference in the clear coat. So I'll see how that turns out once it's buffed. And I also went ahead and wet sanded the back. Didn't have to, but you know, it had several little, still has some little scratches and whatnot, but I just wanted to get it a little nicer to sort of match the front. That's about it, I guess. I'm on to buffing. I've shown this in other videos, but I just use a buffer on a drill. I use this Grioche's machine polish. There's different grades. You know, I usually use like probably 1 and 2, and then I'll switch to Meguiar's Scratch X for the last stage. I could use Grioche's 3 and 4. I actually have those, but the Scratch X seems to be good enough for a lot of my applications. So I'm going to get to work on this. Normally, when I'm sanding with the drill, I'll use a Velcro disc or a wheel and a Velcro pad and do my polishing that way. I've got a couple different kinds of these pads. Some of them are smooth on the bottom and some of them are textured. I think for this side portion and some of the contours, I'm going to try this conical drill attachment. It's the same material as the other pads, but it's just a different shape, so it'll help me get into the areas like the horns and you know, some of these complex curves. So we'll see how that works. I have a hard time filming while I'm doing this, but trust me, it's nothing special. You just put some of the compound on the pad and then you go to town. Put it on the surface and sand away or buff away. Well, this is where things stand at the moment. I had an issue, and the issue was that the lacquer coat on the front and the polyester coat on the back, you could tell the difference in the 2 clear coats. And there was a visible line on the side of the guitar, and I couldn't correct it, and I tried, you know, sand everything down and polish it, but in the end, I ended up with just basically a jagged line and some spots of burn through and whatnot. So I end up respraying the whole guitar. I've got a ton of coats of clear on it. It's nice and shiny, and I'm gonna have to give this thing a couple days to dry before I feel comfortable really getting into it and wet sanding it and polishing it out. But it looks good. There's clear coat on the front and on the back, and I've you know, corrected a lot of little issues with some of the marks that were on the back and whatnot. But anyway, you know, more to come on this thing. I don't have a lot of time in the upcoming week to make a video, but I do hope to finish this video up in a little over a week, or this series up in a little over a week. And in the meantime, I've got some quick tip videos coming out. I may have some videos on some upcoming projects. So please stay engaged, like and subscribe. Please tell a friend. I intend to keep this thing going. It's just really busy and I've got vacations right now. But you all be good, and I'll be back. Thanks a lot.